In 1885, the father of Adolf Hitler, Alois Hitler, married Klara Pölzl. Klara was his third wife. His second wife died of tuberculosis on the 10th of August 1884. The second marriage produced two children, Alois Jr., who was born out of wedlock, and Angela. To go back in time, I think I need to explain the family link between Alois and Klara. In 1876, 16-year-old Klara was hired as a household servant by Alois Hitler, who was then married to his first wife, Anna Glasl-Hörer. Alois had been brought up by a single mother, Maria Schicklgruber. When Maria married Johann Georg Hiedler, Alois was officially designated as Hitler's son. Probably he was also his biological son. Klara's mother was Hitler's niece, so therefore Klara and Alois were first cousins once removed. Alois took Johann Georg Hiedler's surname, which somehow got corrupted into Hitler, although it does sound somewhat similar, Hiedler, Hitler. It would of course be better to have an Austrian say the two names rather than someone from Newcastle, but I don't have an Austrian handy right now. Klara had previously looked after his two children, Alois Jr. and Angela. Alois Hitler wasted no time following his wife's death in getting his niece, once removed, pregnant, and it was just as well that he got papal dispensation to marry her before their first son was born. This was Gustav, who came into the world on the 17th of May 1885 and departed from it on the 9th of December 1887 as a result of diphtheria. The vaccine for diphtheria came out in 1893, and whereas this was a common disease in Europe, it's now rare thanks to vaccinations. The last major outbreak was during the Second World War. Diphtheria is a disease of the upper respiratory tract and it is very infectious. It was noted for being a child killer. On the 23rd of September 1886, Paola gave birth to Ida, who died on the 22nd of January 1888, also from diphtheria. Therefore, by the time Adolf was born on the 20th of April 1889 as the third child, Paola had had two children and she had lost them both, so it should be of no surprise that she was very protective of him, particularly as Adolf was a weak and sickly child. The fourth child, Otto, was born at 8 in the morning of the 17th of June 1892 at the family home at Linzerstrasse in Braunau am Inn. He only lived for 6 days, dying at 8 in the evening of the 23rd of June 1892. The cause of death was hydrocephalus. Hydrocephalus is a condition in which an accumulation of cerebrospinal fluid occurs within the brain, which leads to pressure inside the skull. Around 0.1% of newborns may have this condition even today. The local weekly newspaper, Neue Warte am Inn, reported in its necrologue on the 2nd of July 1892 that Otto Hitler had died aged 7 days, well, in fact it was 6.5 days, and mentioning the cause of death. Otto Hitler was buried in Braunau on the 25th of June 1892 at 4 in the afternoon. Shortly afterwards, the family moved to Passau, and you can see where they lived in Passau in a video I did. A number of books published prior to 2016 have shown that Otto was born before Adolf. This is based, I think, on the recollections of Paola, who was of course born after the events. However, the local records clearly show the birth and death dates of Otto. On the 24th of March 1894, Edmund was born. He succumbed to measles on the 29th of June 1900. By this time, Alois Jr. was 18, Angela 16, and Adolf 11. Whereas of course measles can still occasionally kill, thanks to vaccines, deaths are very rare. At the beginning of the 20th century, deaths from it were still common. The final child, Paola, was born on the 21st of January 1896. She died of cancer aged 64 on the 21st of January 1960. Paola lived alone in Vienna and took the surname Wolf, which sounds as though her brother put it up to it, perhaps to hide who she was related to. She did not marry and had no children. Therefore, we can say that Adolf Hitler had one brother, a stepbrother, and two sisters, one stepsister. In 1938, he wrote out a will in which he referred to Alois Jr. as his stepbrother, but to Angela as his sister. Was this a mistaken redaction, or was it because he felt closer to Angela? That's a question we just don't know. This video shows the house that they were living together in Leonding, and as you can see, it's quite large and there's enough space for the entire family. It was next to the church that they attended. Hitler's mother was very religious and took her children regularly to church. Later, the parents and Edmund were buried in the cemetery, which is vis-a-vis the house. You can see the house and the cemetery and the church in a different video. There will be a link to it below. Klara Pölzl died of cancer in 1907, aged only 47. Despite having 6 children, Klara had no grandchildren. However, the Hitler line did continue. Alois Jr. had 2 sons by 2 different women, one of whom married, and his descendants now live in the United States. His first wife was Irish from Dublin, and she later emigrated to the New York region. Angela had 3 children, Geli, Leo, and Elfriede. Geli committed suicide in her uncle Adolf's apartment in Munich in 1931. Leo had a son who is now living in Linz, Austria. Elfriede had a son who was born in 1945 and who lives in Germany. So I hope you find that of interest, and that if you haven't already done so, you will subscribe. My history specialization is in the Holocaust, but here you'll also find things related to the early Nazi period, obviously the family and the upbringing of Adolf Hitler as well, and many other things. So I hope you find that it's worth subscribing, and all the best from me. Thank you.